Recently, Breath of the Wild was delayed once again, just like every other Zelda game. Big shock. There's never been a Zelda game that I've seen come out without a serious delay, so this was not a shock to me at all. You have to just add 2 years to your expected wait time for any Zelda game. That's just a hard rule. That's always been a hard rule. It'll pay off because like right now I'm waiting 2 more years. I knew that before it was announced that it was delayed because Nintendo has never not delayed this bullshit. So in the meantime, I figured we're going to do a tier list. I figured I would tier every single Zelda game, and there aren't that many of them. I don't know if this list has all of them, kind of just going off of someone else's list. I thought it would be something fun to do though. I thought it would be, you know, content. So let's jump in. Oh, this is weird. It starts with a Link Between Worlds. I want to get to Link Between Worlds later. Let's start with some stuff that we know is like an anchor, right? Like what's like a solid... I'm going to give Ocarina of Time a solid A, which is a little weird. I bet people expected Ocarina of Time to be in the S category. It's known as one of the greatest games ever made. I don't think it is one of the best Zelda games. It is in the upper tiers. There's a few games that I think are better than it. Yeah. I don't want to like dig into it too much. If you've seen Egoraptor's sequelitis video talking about Ocarina of Time, a lot of my thoughts and opinions are expressed there. A lot of people have given their think pieces on this game. It's very good, but it's also very on rails. It doesn't have too much replay value. I've beaten it so many times that I kind of never really want to play it ever again. There's some Zelda games that really genuinely surprise me every time I return to them. They change. They kind of age like a fine wine. Ocarina of Time just isn't one of them. It's a great game though. It's an A. It's an easy A. Easy A. So, A Link to the Past. A Link to the Past is a little less linear than Ocarina of Time. I don't think it's exactly an S. I think it's going to go in the A tier as well. A Link to the Past kind of created a lot of what we take for granted in modern RPGs. It's a brilliant little game. It's one of the first Zelda games to incorporate like a deeper story, and it created a lot of the mythos we know today about the Legend of Zelda franchise. I also think it's a very fun top-down hack and slash RPG. I don't know. Good game. That's what I'm going to say about all of these. They're all good games. Four Swords Adventures. Four Swords Adventures. Where does this go? It's not quite as good as A Link to the Past. I'm gonna have to put this in the B tier. But if I was just talking about Shadow Battle, that would be in the A tier immediately. Shadow Battle is this really cool PvP mode that exists in this game, and it was kind of forgotten about, where 2 players as separate links face off. You can find items around the area and use them against each other. It's really neat. The main game though is kind of like a 10 level game, a multiplayer Zelda game though. It's really different. It uses the Game Boy connection, so you can connect your Game Boy onto your GameCube, and then you walk around the dungeons on your little screen. Like if you and your friend are on the screen on the TV together, and you walk into a cave, it'll pop down into your little Game Boy, and now you're in the cave on your Game Boy, and you're the only one that can see that. I don't know, it's really cool. Four Swords, this is also a B. It's kind of the same thing as Four Swords Adventures. It's a different story, but it's the same concept as a game. Strictly handheld though. You had to connect your Game Boys with the little link cable, and then you would be like playing dungeons together in a Zelda game. Very similar to the Four Swords Adventures. They have almost the same name. I'm putting them in the same tier to reflect that. Link's Awakening. That's another easy A. The music in this game is some of my favorite music in the Zelda franchise. There's 3 big Zelda games for music for me, and this is one of them. It uses Mario sprites, which is funny, but it has a ton of character. It was remastered recently, so go check out the remaster. Majora's Mask. S tier. Majora's Mask is probably one of the most unique Zelda games. I played through this game on stream. No, come on, I just want to stand on the ledge. Oops. Oh, I didn't know. Whoa, that's unforgiving, dude. It spits you up into poison water. The whole thing's set up to a time loop. It's a lot darker than its predecessor. It uses all the same assets as Ocarina of Time. It was kind of a rushed sequel. A lot of the turmoil that was going on in the department working on it, a lot of that stuff ended up leaking into the game in a way that's artful and beautiful. All of the bosses are a little more freeform than in other Zelda games. You can kind of fight them any way you want, and they're all kind of like abstract. One you got to chase around a big kind of loop. Another one's a fish that jumps out of the water over you, and you got to like either aim into the water and attack it or get it while it's jumping over you. Or there's a lot of different ways you can deal with this fish. It's the most introspective and interesting Zelda game. Oracle of Seasons and Ages. These games are okay. I've played Oracle of Seasons and I've played a little bit of Ages. It's like playing Pokemon Red and Blue. I wasn't as connected with them. I'm gonna give them C tiers. Let's jump into the real hot takes now. I see a list of hot takes coming. Phantom Hourglass. It's either a low C or it's a D. It's not like a terrible game. It's just not a very good game. I'm gonna give it a low C, just to be nice. Instead of going for like more expansive, they decided to try and push for a 3D engine for the DS for Zelda. And that ended up leading to what is, in my opinion, a much smaller game. It feels really limited when it comes to the puzzle solving. It feels like it's really pushing the DS hardware, and what you're getting out of it isn't really a good payoff. I love the boat crafting. You can kind of like customize your own boat. I don't really like the boat controls. You draw a path on the map and your boat takes it. It feels like a mobile game for the DS. I would play this game on mobile and probably have more fun. Skyward Sword. I'm actually going to give this B tier. There's a calculative reason that this game is B tier and not A tier. It's so damn linear, and it's decidedly smaller than its sequel. I think that it has less replay value than Ocarina of Time or Link to the Past or Link's Awakening. There's one-to-one sword control, which is really cool. The story elements of the game are great. And Groose, oh my god, I love Groose. Groose is an S tier. I wasn't ranking the game, I was just ranking Groose. It would go bang, but I'm not. I'm ranking the whole game around Groose. And that means back down to a B. Spirit Tracks. I actually like Spirit Tracks more than Phantom Hourglass. I'm gonna bump Phantom Hourglass down to D. So I put Spirit Tracks into C and Phantom Hourglass into D, because I do think Phantom Hourglass is worse than the Seasons games. A giant squid turns Zelda to stone. Go fight the squid and undo it. And you meet a cool character, Linebeck. I kind of like Linebeck, but Linebeck shows up in Spirit Tracks as well. Spirit Tracks also has a better cast of characters. You have Alfonso. The plot's kind of fun. There's a lot more to like about Spirit Tracks. Instead of just drawing a path on a map and just having your boat travel the path and you just shoot things along the way in an arcadey mobile app mini game, you actually play a mini game where you're charting paths on preset trains, but there's enemy trains moving around the tracks that are trying to work against you. So it kind of turns into a puzzle game, and it ends up being a lot more engaging than the open boat mechanics from the previous game. They put more limitations on the world and the player, and it ended up being a more interesting game for it. The boss design in Spirit Tracks is so much better than Phantom Hourglass. Legend of Link is I want to put it in C, but I have to put it in B. It's too hard. It's just too hard of a game. Really difficult. I'm going to put the original Legend of Zelda in A tier. That's easy. It's a classic. You got to pay respects to the classics. It invented a lot of concepts when it comes to non-linear game design that are still used today. Wind Waker is a Zelda game I have a lot of fondness for. S tier. I'd say this is definitely one of the 3 Zelda games that are big for music for me. Wind Waker is one of the few Zelda games like Majora's Mask that in my opinion is about something larger than just telling the Zelda canon story. It's basically The Last Jedi way before The Last Jedi happened and done way better. The whole ending is about letting go of the past and moving forward. I'd say it stands on its own. It's just like a good little fairy tale adventure game. I've never fucking played Triforce Heroes. I've never fucking played this game. I'm gonna put it in D. but it's unranked. We're moving on. Twilight Princess. Twilight Princess. People are gonna hate me for this. Actually gonna give this one somewhere between a B and a C. I might throw it in B. I can't say that Twilight Princess is worse than Skyward Sword. It's not worse than Skyward Sword. It's a better game. The world feels kind of dead, but I'm okay with that. I think for the game itself, that's fitting. Twilight Princess is the third game I have to point out the music in. The dark fantasy, like melancholy tracks you get out of Twilight Princess are some of the best music in the franchise. But there's some negatives that are keeping it in the B tier. And a lot of that has to do with the lack of replayability, the opening's too long. A lot of the dungeons in Twilight Princess feel repetitive compared to dungeons in other Zelda games. But it's a pretty good dark fantasy. It's a pretty good GameCube era game. Actually, before we get to Breath of the Wild, let's do A Link Between Worlds. I dumped it into the back at the beginning of the list. I said I wasn't going to do it till later. Let's rank it now, because I feel like now I have a pretty good bearing of like how I'm really doing this, you know? Everything that's just like gold with red text gets in the A. This one's green with red text, so it might go in the B. I'd say this is as good as A Link to the Past. It's like worthwhile as a sequel. I'm going to put them side by side. The dungeon design's part of what saves it, and the world design, you get to kind of like flatten yourself against walls and do all the super Paper Mario type stuff. The 3D just looks gorgeous on this game. I hate that that's a factor that I'm throwing in here, but I just gotta say, the 3D looks gorgeous on this game. The plot's good. The money system is interesting. You have to like pay for your items and you lose them on death. It's different. I definitely had more fun with this game than anything else that I put in B tier, so that's why it's an A. It's essentially a sequel to A Link to the Past. Let's talk about Minish Cap. Minish Cap is an easy S tier. This is easily the best top-down Zelda. You get to collect these little rune things that you put them together and they all have like special things they do to complete quest lines. There's so many side quests, which I love. Majora's Mask. I love side quests. Hello. It's great art direction and sprite design. It kind of blends the top-down moody sort of A Link to the Past look with a Wind Waker look. Kind of cartoony, kind of fun. The music's more JRPG in this game than in other Zelda games, but I kind of welcome that. A lot of different things you can do, a lot of different puzzles, a lot of unique items. You have these mitts that let you dig into things. You do eventually get the Four Sword. Minish Cap is almost like the Four Swords universe version of Skyward Sword, because it's about the invention of the Four Sword. Skyward Sword is about the invention of the Master Sword. This is so confusing. The Picori Sword becomes the Four Sword, and the Skyward Sword becomes the Master Sword. The Picori Sword and the Skyward Sword have the exact same backstory, so that's interesting. I don't know why that is. Breath of the Wild. Is it an S tier? Is it an A tier? It's an S tier. I'm sorry. I'm giving into that hype. So Breath of the Wild is the first Zelda game to go full on with that RPG. They went full tilt with it. 160 Korok puzzles, 120 shrine dungeons, which are like little miniature dungeons. If I had any complaints, I'd just say I don't like that all the shrine dungeons are the exact same palette. Yeah, I wish that there were like there's a bunch of like fire paletted dungeons. Now there's a bunch of forest paletted dungeons and a bunch of desert paletted dungeons, you know, like it'd be cool if we just had more variety in like atmosphere while we're inside of dungeons solving puzzles. Other than that, like the world is massive. The technical feats behind it are really cool because you have these giant colossal like mechanical animals that you can see from the horizon line, and they're always like rendered and moving, and they have these like beams of light interconnecting them all at the center of the map. The grass looks gorgeous. I love playing with fire and wind to find new ways to just cheese the system, and using the rune that freezes time and allows you to build up momentum. The runes are kind of designed to let you play with the physics of the game. Breath of the Wild is a physics-based playground, and it's a massive one. So yeah, that is my tier list. Honestly, I don't think it's that bad. We should save this bad boy. I hope nobody's mad at how low on the list I put Phantom Hourglass or the Four Swords games or Twilight Princess. Yeah, here's to another 2 years delay for Breath of the Wild 2, and have a good day, everyone.